walked into my daughter's house expecting a family reunion and stopped cold when I saw my wife on her knees scrubbing the floor while my son-in-law stood over her, telling her to move faster. She didn't even hear me come in. She looked tired, small, like she belonged to them. In that instant, I knew something had gone terribly wrong in my own family. And if you've ever felt the chill of realizing someone you love is being used, you'll understand what came next. I left Atlanta before sunrise, the kind of morning when the air sits quiet on the skin and the roads feel half asleep. 5 years working up and down the East Coast had taught me how to live out of a duffel bag, how to keep my mind steady, how to swallow loneliness until it behaved. Still, knowing I was finally heading to see my wife again put a tremble in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. I kept picturing her smile, the way she used to hold my arm when we walked anywhere together. It pushed me forward more than the coffee did. Olivia had called me the night before. Her voice stayed clipped, almost rehearsed. She asked what time I'd get there, but didn't bother asking how I'd been. I tried ignoring the sharpness in her tone. Kids grow distant, I told myself. Life changes people. Maybe she just had too much on her plate. That's what I wanted to believe, even if a part of me knew something in her had cooled, long before I ever packed my bags 5 years ago. The drive into Charlotte rolled smooth until I turned into their subdivision. Nice neighborhood, too tidy. The kind of place where people wave without meaning it. I pulled up in front of their house and sat for a moment, letting the engine tick down while I steadied my breathing. My wife was inside. That should have been enough to make any man feel at home. Ethan opened the door before I even knocked. He leaned against the frame like he owned the whole block. "You took long enough, James." Not a hello, not even a nod. His eyes skimmed over me like I was a bill he didn't want to pay. I'd met plenty of men like him over the years, loud when they felt safe, small when they didn't. "Good to see you too, son," I said, keeping my tone even. "Yeah, sure. Just try not to make a mess. We finally got the house running the way it should." I didn't understand what that meant, not then. But the way he smirked told me it wasn't a joke. Something in his words scraped the back of my throat, yet I swallowed it because I wasn't there for him. I stepped past and set my bags down near the entryway. Olivia appeared at the top of the stairs. She didn't rush toward me. She didn't smile. She just said, "Dad," like the word was another chore on her list. I opened my arms anyway, hoping she'd fall into them the way she did when she was little. She walked down, but she kept her hands at her sides. No hug, no warmth. "You could have warned us you were coming early," she muttered. "I told you the date." "Well, we're busy." I studied her face. She looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from hard work. It was the sort that grows out of resentment. I tried brushing it aside. 5 years apart leaves a lot of room for misunderstanding. Before I could ask where my wife was, Ethan raised his voice. "She's around somewhere, doing what she usually does. You know, helping out." Helping out. Odd phrasing. My wife was never the kind of woman anyone needed to put to work. She gave freely, but not like that. Something in my chest tightened. I walked deeper into the house. Everything looked newer than I remembered. new furniture, new layout, new decorations. None of it felt like her touch. My wife loved soft colours, quilts, little reminders of home. This place felt staged, like a catalogue. "Where is she?" I asked. Olivia crossed her arms. "She's fine, Dad. She stays busy. It keeps her from worrying too much." Worrying about what? I wanted to ask, but Olivia had already turned her back and walked toward the kitchen without waiting for a reply. I followed her voice, but before I reached the doorway, Ethan blocked me with a hand on the frame. "Look, James, don't start grilling everyone. Things work a certain way around here, and we don't need extra tension." He said it calmly, like he was giving me friendly advice, but the warning in his eyes wasn't friendly at all. I took a small step back, not because I feared him, but because I didn't want to give Olivia another reason to shut me out. "I'll find her myself," I said, brushing past him. I reached the hallway and heard something faint. Fabric dragging against tile, the dull clink of a bucket being nudged, the rhythmic movements of someone scrubbing. My stomach dipped. My wife never scrubbed floors. Not at 61. Not with her knees aching the way they had these past few years. Before I could take another step, Olivia called out from the dining room. "Dad, why don't you go sit on the porch for a minute? Let her finish what she's doing. It's her idea." Her idea. The way she said it felt too practiced. I stepped outside because I didn't trust myself to respond without showing the crack growing inside me. The porch had 2 rocking chairs, both empty. I stood there, listening to the sounds drifting from inside. The scrape of a brush, a soft cough, the swish of water in a metal bucket. My hands tightened on the railing, not from anger, from something older and heavier. The kind of feeling that tells a man he's been allowing too much for too long. That was the first moment I realized silence wasn't protecting anyone. It was erasing me, inch by inch, from the life I had built. And somewhere behind me, my wife kept working, unaware I was standing there, trying to catch my breath. Ethan's tone still clung to me when I stepped back inside. Something in the air had shifted, the way a room feels after someone slams a door, even when no one touches anything. Olivia walked past without meeting my eyes, carrying a stack of folded towels, like she needed a task to justify ignoring me. The distance between us didn't shout. It murmured, steady and cold, as if everyone had quietly decided where I belonged, and it wasn't in the center of this household. A neighbor knocked on the open doorway, calling Olivia's name. They exchanged a warm hello. When I moved into view, the woman's smile faltered. She nodded politely, then shifted her attention right back to my daughter. It was subtle, but people don't hide their true understanding very well. Someone had fed her a story about me, and she had swallowed it whole. She left after a short chat, glancing at me one last time. Curious, guarded, like I was a relative they'd been warned about. I tried to brush it off, chalk it up to awkward timing. But I'd lived long enough to recognize when judgment was already in the room before I even stepped into it. I drifted toward the living area, noticing how conversations stopped whenever I appeared. Olivia lingered near the kitchen, whispering to Ethan, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as if I were a burden he wished would disappear. Their silence wasn't empty. It carried intent. I felt pushed toward the edges of their life, reduced to someone they tolerated rather than welcomed. My phone rang, a faint vibration in my pocket. Marcus's name lit up the screen. I stepped outside again, needing the call more than I wanted to admit. "You make it there?" he asked. "I'm here. How's she doing?" I hesitated. The truth sat heavy in my throat. "I haven't seen her yet." He breathed out slowly, that old gravelly exhale of his. "James, listen. You spent years showing up for everybody. Don't start disappearing on yourself." "I'm not disappearing." "Then don't let them shrink you." His words cut closer than I expected. Marcus had known me since before the rail yard days, back when I believed patience could fix anything. His voice wrapped around a part of me that had grown numb. "Folks treat you how you allow them to," he said. "Remember that." I closed my eyes for a moment. The truth of it settled deep. A bark from inside made me look up. Ethan again, calling for Olivia. I ended the call and stepped back toward the doorway. They didn't hear me approach, too busy discussing something in low tones. When I walked into the hallway, both of them fell silent. "I'll get dinner started," Olivia said quickly, brushing past me as though physical contact might spark an argument. I watched her push a strand of hair behind her ear, not once glancing my way. Something about that hurt more than the cold shoulder from any stranger. Ethan grabbed a jacket and left the room without a word, letting the front door click shut behind him. I stood alone in the quiet space, realizing the house didn't feel familiar anymore. The pictures on the walls weren't the ones I remembered. The layout didn't match what my wife and I had talked about when Olivia first moved in. It all felt redesigned around someone else's comfort, someone who hadn't been around long enough to earn that privilege. My steps brought me toward the back of the house, following a faint sound I couldn't place. Halfway down the hallway, I paused. There was the swish of cloth again. Gentle, steady, unhurried, but weighted. My heart tightened. I moved closer, then changed direction, letting my hand fall to my side. I wasn't ready to see my wife working like that again. Not so soon. Instead, I turned back toward the living room, feeling like a visitor, pressing his forehead against the glass of a life he once belonged to. The doorframe cooled under my fingertips. I stood there long enough to hear chairs shifting, footsteps passing, and Olivia humming softly while she arranged something in the kitchen. None of it included me. For the first time in my own family, I felt like I was standing on the outside looking in. A man who had built the foundation, but wasn't invited to walk on it anymore. I stayed there, unsure what kept me rooted, listening to the house move around me while my thoughts tugged in different directions. The next morning started with a knock at the front door. I opened it halfway, expecting a delivery driver or maybe a neighbour asking about a lost package. Instead, Mrs. Lorne from across the street stood there, holding a container of muffins. She smiled politely until her eyes met mine, and that smile wavered the way people flinch when they see something that doesn't fit the version of the story they've been told. "Oh, James, I didn't know you were back." "Just got in," I said. She hesitated, shifting the container between her hands. "Well, I'm glad you finally came home. Must be hard, leaving your wife alone all these years." My hand tightened around the doorframe. Alone? Her expression slipped into confusion. Olivia said you were always on the road. Hardly called. Didn't visit. I assumed you two had some sort of arrangement. I inhaled slowly, letting the words settle. That's not exactly how things went. She blinked, unsure whether to apologize or retreat. The awkward silence made her step backward. I should let you all get back to your day. She hurried away, leaving me staring at the sidewalk, feeling something twist inside my chest. I hadn't abandoned my wife. I sent money every month, checked in whenever I could. Olivia knew the truth. Yet somehow the story had been rewritten, and I had been turned into a man who walked away from his marriage. A voice called from behind me. Dad, don't let the cold in. Olivia appeared, wiping her hands on a towel, as if the conversation at the door meant nothing. Mum needs quiet this morning. No wandering around the house, okay? Let her rest. I came to see her, Olivia. And you will, later. She's tired. Please, just let her have space. She spoke the way nurses talk to confused patients, gentle but firm, dismissive without saying the word. I tried stepping past her toward the hallway, but she moved sideways, blocking me with a strained smile. Dad? Not right now. Something in her insistence didn't match the warm daughter I remembered. A wall stood behind her voice, and I couldn't yet tell if it was fear or guilt holding it up. Ethan's voice carried from the living room. Keys are in the drawer. I glanced at the drawer. A new lock had been added. Small detail, but it hit me harder than it should have. This was my wife's home. Olivia and Ethan were guests. At least, that was the original plan. Now they were rearranging the rules, as if I needed permission to reach for anything. I walked toward the dining area, pretending to look for water. The cabinet where my wife kept documents used to be by the window. Now it sat in a corner, locked as well. Fresh hardware, shiny, recently installed. Olivia watched me from the doorway, arms crossed. Don't go through our things, she said. Our things? When did this house become? Dad, please, don't start. Ethan stepped in, slipping an arm around her shoulder with a casualness that didn't feel casual at all. We organize everything now. Makes life easier for your wife. Less confusion. That word again. Confusion. They tossed it around like a diagnosis. Where is she? I asked quietly. Olivia's gaze faltered, but she recovered. Resting, like I said. I didn't push. Something told me forcing it would only tighten the net they were weaving around her. Instead, I stepped into the garage under the excuse of checking my tools. The space was cluttered, but not in my wife's way. Boxes had been stacked to hide a corner. I moved them aside and found a folder stuffed behind a toolbox. Medical paperwork, insurance notices, a form stating requires supervision for signing official documents, dated months earlier. The signature looked shaky, too shaky, and not quite hers. My pulse thudded. I snapped a picture with my phone, slipped the folder back exactly as I found it, then leaned over the workbench, pretending to inspect a wrench, when I heard footsteps coming down the hall. Ethan poked his head inside. Need something? Just checking if my old drills are still here, I answered. Garage is off limits soon. We're reorganizing. That word repeated, Reorganizing felt like a quiet erasure of everything familiar. I stepped past him and returned to the kitchen. Olivia kept her back to me as she washed dishes, scrubbing harder than necessary, shoulders lifted tight around her neck. She didn't turn when I spoke.
Liv, why would anyone think I left your mother alone for years?
The plate in her hand paused mid-air. She didn't look up. People talk, Dad. You were gone, that's all they saw. But you knew the truth. She set the plate down a little too sharply. Can we not do this right now? Her voice wavered just barely, enough to make me wonder what she feared more, my questions or the lies she had already put in motion. I didn't press further. Not yet. Something told me this wasn't the time to push a locked door. Before leaving the room, I glanced at the hallway that led to the back bedroom, the one they said my wife was resting in. I didn't walk toward it. My feet stayed planted, but my mind reached for every sound coming from that direction. Soft movement, a faint cough, the shuffle of slippers. The house didn't feel like hers anymore. I didn't feel like mine either. As I turned toward the living room, a drawer slid shut behind Olivia. She didn't think I noticed.
I kept walking, letting the question sit heavily between us while I tried to steady my breathing. Ethan's voice hit me before I even reached the dining room. What is wrong with you? Watch what you're doing. The sound carried a sharpness that made my steps stiffen. I rounded the corner and saw my wife standing beside the table, leaning slightly to one side. A tray lay on the floor, glasses rolling toward the baseboard. She wasn't hurt, just startled, but Ethan towered over her with his jaw clenched, acting as though she'd ruined something precious instead of dropping a few pieces of glassware. Olivia stood nearby with her arms folded, eyes fixed on the mess instead of the woman who raised her. "I'm sorry, my hand slipped," my wife whispered. Her voice had thinned since I last heard it, frail in a way I didn't remember. Ethan snapped again. "You should have paid attention. Now look at this." The words scraped across the room. I stepped forward. "That's enough." Ethan straightened, annoyance flickering across his face as if I'd interrupted something he believed he had the right to continue. "James, stay out of it." "I won't. She doesn't answer to you." He rolled his eyes, then bent down and started picking up the glasses with exaggerated frustration. "If she's going to help out, she needs to do it right." "She's not helping out," I said. "She's my wife, and she doesn't owe you anything." My voice stayed steady, though something warm burned beneath it. Not rage. Clarity, the kind that arrives when a line finally reveals itself. Olivia's gaze twitched, but she didn't step in, didn't defend her mother-in-law, didn't tell her husband to calm down. She simply said, "Mum knows what she's doing. She likes keeping busy." My wife stared at the floor, as if agreeing would make the moment pass faster. Her shoulders curled inward. I crouched beside her and helped her stand upright again. "You don't need to explain anything," I murmured. Her fingers trembled when she touched my sleeve. Ethan tossed the last broken glass into the trash. "Look, James, we have our own routine here, and you showing up unannounced is throwing everything off. If you're going to be here, follow our system. Your system seems to involve treating her like hired help. Don't start with that." He pointed toward the hallway. "Honestly, if you're going to cause tension, maybe it's better you don't stay overnight. We've got enough going on." "I came to see my wife, not to ask your permission." "Well, you can't stay here," he said. "We don't have space." Then he walked to the entryway,
grabbed my duffel bag and swung the door open. The bag hit the porch with a dull thud. Olivia flinched slightly but didn't tell him to stop. Not once. I felt something shift inside me. Not a snap, not a break, more like a hinge turning, exposing another side of a truth I'd been avoiding. I looked at her, waiting for her to say anything, explain, soften the blow, show a trace of the girl he used to run to me after school, with paint on her hands and too many stories to finish. She only hugged herself tighter. "Dad, maybe staying somewhere else for a night will give us all some breathing room." Breathing room? From me? My wife touched my hand again, her grip weak but pleading, as though telling me not to escalate things. I didn't. Quiet has always been my first defense. "I'll step outside for a minute," I said. Ethan shrugged. "Good idea." I walked past them, opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The bag sat at my feet. The house behind me buzzed with low murmurs, Olivia blaming stress, Ethan muttering about chaos, my wife trying to keep the peace with a soft, tired voice. None of it sounded like a home. I picked up the bag and set it beside the railing, not ready to leave, not ready to stay, unsure where I fit in the very place I had helped them build. Inside, chairs scraped softly across the floor. Someone shut a cabinet. My wife apologized again for the tray. I stood there, listening, trying to understand when the ground beneath me had shifted so far without my noticing. I hadn't been back on the porch long when my phone buzzed again. The number didn't look familiar, but something about the pattern made me answer anyway. "Mr. Holloway?" The voice was soft, a little hesitant. Then I recognized it. "Rosa? From St. Mary's?" "Yes. I didn't know if I should call, but I saw your wife last week. She looked exhausted. Not, 'I've had a busy day,' tired. More like she'd been pushed past her limit." My grip tightened on the phone. "She said she needed to hurry back before your daughter got upset. I asked her to sit down for a minute, maybe drink some water. She refused, said it'd make things worse." I leaned against the railing, trying to steady the sudden heaviness in my chest. "Thank you for telling me." She lowered her voice. I didn't want to interfere, but something isn't right. She seemed afraid to go home late. I've never seen her like that. A door shut inside the house. Footsteps moved toward the kitchen. I kept my voice low. "I appreciate you calling. Please check on her, Mr. Holloway. She didn't look safe." Rosa hung up before I could respond. The quiet that followed felt sharper than anything Ethan had said earlier. I stayed on the porch until my breathing settled, then stepped to the side yard to call Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. "You sound winded," he said. "What happened?" "Someone just told me my wife is scared to come home late, scared of our own daughter's reaction." Marcus didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice carried that rough honesty he never sugarcoated. "James, they've been moving pieces while you were gone. You're only now seeing the full board." "Meaning?" "You've always taken on more than you should. Gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. You did that when your wife got sick. You did it with Olivia after her mother passed. You felt guilty, so you let her shape the story." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "She was grieving. So were you. But you turned your grief into work. She turned hers into blame. Folks like that don't stop once they find a way to make someone else carry the weight." The words settled deeper than I wanted them to. "Rosa said she saw my wife trembling," I murmured. "Said she looked like she'd been running errands for Olivia all day." "You surprised?"
The question was blunt. It cut through every excuse had been stacking like sandbags. "You walked into that house," Marcus continued, "and nobody made room for you. Not because there isn't space, because they don't want you to see what's going on." A window slid open behind me. Olivia's voice floated out. "Dad, dinner will be ready soon." "I'll be in," I answered before stepping farther into the yard. Marcus kept talking. "You need to pay attention. Anytime someone keeps you away from your own wife, something's off. Controlling access is the first sign of someone trying to rewrite the truth. They locked cabinets, changed routines, told neighbors I'd abandoned her. Exactly. They're shaping a narrative without you, and once that sticks, you'll always look like the outlier." A lump formed in my throat. Olivia's telling relatives I'm forgetful, that I'm slipping. She's isolating you, man. It's a tactic. Question your memory, your stability, your judgment. Makes anything you say sound unreliable. I exhaled through my nose, slowly, deliberately. What do I do? Start keeping your own record. Notes, pictures, anything that contradicts their story. Don't argue, don't confront. Just document. Behind me, the screen door creaked. Ethan stepped outside. "Everything okay out here?" he asked. Marcus heard his voice. "I'll let you handle that." "But James, stop waiting for someone else to choose you. Stand up before they bury every part of you that's still awake." He hung up. I lowered the phone and slipped it into my pocket as Ethan approached. "Dinner's almost done," he said. "Try not to wander too much. Mom's tired." I nodded without answering. His expression tightened as if silence irritated him more than disagreement. He walked back inside. I remained in the yard, listening to the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation drifting from the kitchen. None of it sounded right. Rosa's words replayed in my mind. So did Marcus's. I pulled out my phone again, opened the photo folder, and stared at the image I'd taken of the paperwork in the garage. My thumb hovered over the screen, then moved to take another picture. This time of the house from the side angle, where the new locks were visible on the windows. A simple gesture. Quiet, but deliberate. I kept going, letting instinct guide me, capturing small details I hadn't noticed earlier. Scratches on the doorframe, the lock on the cabinet by the dining room, the new keypad on the hallway closet. Each one felt like another thread I needed to keep track of. Olivia called my name through the open door. "Dad, come eat." I stepped toward the house, already knowing I wasn't just a visitor trying to adjust to a new household. I was a man finally recognizing a pattern he had ignored for far too long. I waited until the house settled for the night before moving again. Olivia had gone upstairs. Ethan's footsteps faded down the hall. My wife lay in the back bedroom, breathing lightly, the kind of breath people take when they're tired down to the bone. I eased the door shut and slipped into the kitchen. The sink held a stack of dishes she hadn't finished. The sponge sat in her hand earlier, trembling a little. She shouldn't have been doing chores at that hour. She shouldn't have been doing them at all. I raised my phone and took a single photo. No angles, no drama. Just a moment, frozen long enough to prove what was happening. A message buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Stay out of family business. No name, no punctuation, just a warning. I deleted nothing, saved everything. The house felt too still after that, as if it were listening. I opened the pantry and spotted another locked container, one I'd never seen before. A clipboard sat tucked beside it, with a partially filled contract about household responsibilities. Some lines had my wife's name scribbled beside them, in handwriting that didn't look like hers. I captured the document quickly, slid it back exactly as I'd found it, and closed the door. My mind kept arranging details like pieces on a board. New locks, isolated rooms, rewritten narratives, controlled routines. Not random. Coordinated. Hola had tightened her grip one small step at a time, until I barely recognized the house we once shared. Half an hour passed. No one came down. I walked quietly to the living room and placed my phone near the vent. The metal carried sound better than any recorder I'd ever used. Olivia and Ethan eventually returned downstairs, talking under their breath. Their words travelled through the vent clearly enough. "He's too involved," Olivia muttered. "He'll get bored and leave," Ethan replied. "He always does." I hit save, tucked the phone away again. My hands didn't shake this time. Something sharper had settled in me, steady, calculating, stripped of the hope that things would fix themselves. Outside, a pair of headlights paused in front of the driveway longer than necessary. I stepped behind the curtain and watched a dark sedan linger before finally rolling away. No plates I recognized. No reason for anyone to be sitting there that late. Another thread. I returned to the garage, using the flashlight on my phone. More papers were stuffed behind the same toolbox as before. Bank slips, pharmacy receipts, appointment reminders that had never been mentioned to me. One slip listed medications strong enough to make a healthy person unsteady. My wife had no reason to be prescribed something like that. I copied each page, kept my breathing low and even, then placed everything back. Somewhere upstairs, a door clicked. Ethan's voice drifted down. "He's still awake?" "Just leave him," Olivia answered. "We'll handle it." Handle what? I stayed in the garage until the house fell silent again. My reflection stared back at me from the old metal cabinet. Older than I remembered, but clearer now. Not confused, not hesitant, just aware. Another alert flashed across my screen. Voicemail. No number. I held the phone to my ear. "You don't belong there anymore," a voice whispered. "Let it go before it gets worse." No threat, no insult, just a quiet suggestion wrapped in something cold. I walked back toward the kitchen, slipped the phone into my pocket, and refilled my wife's water glass. She would need it in the morning. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. A chair shifted slightly when I brushed past it. Every sound carried the weight of something waiting to surface. I stood there a moment, letting the pieces settle where they wanted to fall. I pushed the laundry room door with my shoulder, expecting to find an empty space and maybe a basket waiting to be folded. Instead, my wife lay crumpled beside the dryer, one arm tucked under her, the other reaching toward a bottle of detergent knocked onto its side. I knelt so fast my knee hit the tile. "Honey, can you hear me?" Her breath fluttered against my palm, shallow and uneven. Sweat clung to her temples. A damp towel lay beside her. She must have been switching loads, trying to finish chores that shouldn't have belonged to her in the first place. Olivia's voice pierced the hallway before I even shouted for help. "Mum, are you serious right now? We have company coming. She appeared in the doorway, hands on her hips, eyes locking onto her mother without an ounce of concern. I swear, she always collapses when she doesn't want to work. I looked up at my daughter slowly. Olivia, she passed out. She does this, Dad. She exaggerates. You fall for it every single time.
My wife stirred slightly, eyelids trembling. Olivia sighed as if the scene inconvenienced her evening. She needs to stop using this trick. People are talking. Something inside me tightened, but no anger rose outward. No yelling, no sharp words. It all settled deeply. Heavy, controlled, final. I lifted my wife off the floor, gathering her gently against my chest. Her head fell onto my shoulder, weak and warm. I'm taking her out of here, I said. Dad, you're overreacting. I walked past her. Put her down, Olivia demanded. Dad, you can't just walk out. I kept moving. Ethan stormed out of the living room as I headed toward the front door. What's going on? She fainted, I replied. I'm taking her to get checked. Not without us knowing why, he snapped. You can't just snatch her like that. My keys were already in my free hand. I didn't look at him. Move. He stepped aside, more stunned by my calm than by my words. The door opened easily. Cool air hit my face. I carried her to the car and buckled her in carefully. While I started the engine, she whispered something too faint to understand. I squeezed her hand. I've got you. Halfway down the street, my phone rang. Ethan's number. I let it buzz until it stopped. The clinic lobby was quiet when we arrived. A nurse hurried her onto a stretcher, while another asked questions I couldn't fully answer. How long she'd been working, whether she'd eaten, whether she'd been dizzy earlier. I had guesses, not answers. I waited in a plastic chair, elbows on my knees, trying to breathe normally. That's when 2 officers walked in. Mr. Holloway? One asked. I stood slowly. Yes? We received a call from your daughter. She said you forced your wife out of the home, possibly without her consent. The words hovered there, absurd at first, then painfully familiar. Another attempt to paint me as unstable, unreliable, confused. She fainted, I said. I brought her here because she needed help. The officers exchanged a quick look. We still need to confirm her condition and make sure she's here voluntarily. One followed a nurse toward the back. The other remained near me. This kind of misunderstanding happens, he said carefully. Family tensions, miscommunication. There was no misunderstanding, I answered. He shifted his weight but kept his expression neutral. It didn't matter. The seed had already been planted. Olivia knew exactly what she was doing. I sank back into the chair, the officer standing a few feet away. No anger rose this time either. Only a cold clarity spreading through my ribs, steadying me more than any outburst could have. If I kept quiet now, I'd lose everything. My wife's safety, my own name, the truth itself. A nurse returned and spoke directly to the officer. She's conscious now. She confirmed she wanted her husband to bring her here. The officer nodded, relieved. We won't escalate the call, he told me. But you might want to address things with your family soon. He didn't know how far the damage had already travelled. When he left, I leaned back and watched the automatic doors slide shut behind him. My hands rested on my knees, still, deliberate. The point where a man breaks isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the moment he stops defending himself in someone else's story and starts preparing to reclaim his own. I sat outside the clinic with my wife resting in the back seat, her breathing steadier after the IV. I was about to start the engine when someone tapped lightly on the window. Mrs. Daly, our next-door neighbour, stood there holding a small flash drive between two fingers as if it burned. "James, I've been debating whether to give you this," she said, "but after seeing the ambulance earlier, I think you need it." I stepped out, careful not to wake my wife, and she pressed the drive into my palm. "My porch camera faces your garage," she whispered. I didn't mean to pry, I couldn't ignore what I saw last week. Her eyes moved toward the clinic doors. Something in them trembled. "I made a copy, just in case you ever needed proof." I thanked her and slid the drive into my pocket. She didn't linger, just nodded once and hurried back to her car. When I reached home, Olivia and Ethan were waiting in the driveway, standing shoulder to shoulder like a united front. Ethan's face twisted into a smirk the second he spotted the flash drive in my hand. "What's that?" he asked. "Another one of your investigations?" I didn't answer. Walked right past them and into the house. They followed, spitting questions behind me like gravel hitting concrete. "Dad, you're making this impossible." "You're paranoid," Olivia chimed in. "You twist every little thing into an attack." "Maybe the stress is catching up to your memory," Ethan added. I ignored the bait. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, plugged the drive into my laptop, and opened the only file inside. Both of them hovered nearby, arms crossed, pretending they weren't interested, though their eyes darted to the screen every few seconds. The footage loaded. A grainy image of my garage appeared, dim yet clear enough. My wife sat on a folding chair, shoulders trembling, hands clasped on her knees. Olivia paced back and forth, waving a pen. "Just sign it, Mum. It's routine. You don't need to make this dramatic." Ethan stood behind her, arms folded, blocking the only exit. My wife's voice came through faint but audible. "I don't understand. What is this?" "Power of attorney," Ethan replied. "We're handling things for you and Dad. It's for everyone's benefit. Stop overthinking." I don't want to sign." "You never want to sign anything," Olivia snapped. "You've always been difficult." My wife shrank back. Ethan stepped forward, placed the paper on her lap, and curled her fingers around the pen. "Just write your name. We don't have all night." Her hand shook so violently the image blurred. She signed anyway, out of fear, not consent. At the table, Ethan barked a laugh. "Oh, come on, that's nothing. Parents sign things all the time. You're overreacting." Olivia folded her arms tighter. She knew what she was doing. "You're twisting it." But I wasn't listening anymore. The footage continued. Olivia snatched the paper as soon as the last shaky letter hit the page. Ethan unlocked the side door and ushered her out. Not a word of thank you. Not a moment of comfort. I paused the video. Neither of them spoke now. Olivia's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Ethan tried to look unfazed, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. "This doesn't mean anything," he said. "You're reading into it." She looked confused,
I replied quietly and terrified.
You weren't there, Olivia muttered. You don't know what she's like these days. A strange calm settled over me, steady enough to cut through every excuse they threw. Watching the footage had given me more than proof. It handed me the thread that tied all their lies together. They never acted alone. Olivia pushed because Ethan stood behind her. Ethan pushed because Olivia needed someone to echo her rage. Neither knew how to take responsibility without leaning on the other's shadow. Dependency masquerading as authority, fear pretending to be control, lies holding hands with entitlement. Their entire scheme rested on that weakness, needing each other to stay afloat. Break that rhythm and everything they built would collapse. Ethan stepped closer to the table. Look, James, you're blowing this out of proportion. People sign things when they're tired, when they're confused. I cut him off with a lift of my hand. I know what I'm looking at, and I know exactly what you tried to take. He froze. Olivia's breath hitched. Outside, a car crawled past the house, slow and deliberate. Another unfamiliar vehicle, the same type that had been circling the past few nights. Their world was starting to crack around the edges. Mine, however, was settling into place for the first time in years. I closed the laptop, slid the flash drive into my pocket, and stood to get my wife a glass of water. The running tap filled the kitchen with a low hum, while Olivia and Ethan whispered rapidly behind me, trying to coordinate their next move. Their panic told me everything I needed to know. The truth had finally reached the surface, and I had the thread. The conference room felt too small for the three of us, even though no one had raised a voice yet. Olivia sat rigid in her chair, fingers locked together in her lap. Ethan slouched beside her, pretending he wasn't bothered, though his leg bounced under the table. My attorney placed a folder in front of me and nodded once. I opened it slowly. Let's start, I said. I slid the first photograph across the table, the one of my wife slumped beside the dryer, sweat beading on her temples. Olivia looked away immediately. She always does that, she whispered. She exaggerates when she's tired. I didn't respond. The second image followed, her standing in front of the sink at midnight, eyes unfocused, shoulders sagging under work she should never have been doing. Ethan snorted. You take pictures of everything now? Maybe that's the problem. My attorney lifted a hand gently, silencing him without a word. And this? I continued. The flash drive clicked onto the table. Ethan stiffened as soon as it touched wood. Olivia's eyes widened just a fraction, but I caught it. The attorney opened his laptop and played the recording. The garage appeared on the screen, Olivia pacing, Ethan blocking the exit, my wife trembling in the chair. Not a sound came from either of them as the footage rolled. Not even when Olivia snapped at her mother. Not even when Ethan forced the pen into her hand. Not even when my wife whispered, I don't understand. Olivia pressed her fingers to her mouth. Ethan's bouncing leg froze altogether. I let the silence stretch. Let them sit in the truth they had tried so hard to bury. She signed because she was scared, I said quietly. Not because she agreed. Ethan finally broke. She knew what she was doing. You're twisting this. You always twist things. Your wife, she's not as fragile as she pretends. She plays you. Everything that's happening is because you refuse to see. He kept talking, words spilling out faster and louder. Every sentence blaming the woman who had just survived a fainting spell. Something inside me twitched at that. The same place that still carried the scar from losing my first wife years ago. A memory flickered. A hospital room. A hand slipping out of mine. My oldest daughter crying quietly at my shoulder. I steadied my breath. "Don't finish that sentence," I said. Ethan swallowed whatever he was about to spit. I turned to Olivia. "Look at her face in that video. Does she look like someone who understood? Someone who had a choice?" Her lips trembled. Dad, I never meant for her to be scared. You don't understand how much pressure. Pressure doesn't justify cruelty." She covered her face with her hands, shoulders curling inward. Her confidence had cracked, the thing she relied on most now slipping through her fingers. My attorney opened the final folder and slid the packet toward them. "These," he said calmly, "are affidavits from neighbours. They confirm a pattern of coercion, verbal abuse, and restricted access to the victim." Ethan lurched forward. "Victim? You're calling her a victim now?" "She is," I replied. "And the law agrees." He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. My attorney didn't flinch. I didn't either. Then came the final blow. The attorney placed a legally drafted revocation of all previously signed documents onto the table, followed by a criminal complaint prepared for submission. "This packet," he explained, "nullifies every signature obtained under duress, and this one refers the entire matter to the district attorney's office. Elder abuse, fraud, coercion, property misrepresentation. It's all outlined clearly." Olivia's breathing hitched. "Dad, please, we can talk about this. Don't do this to us." I watched her fingers tremble the same way my wife's had in the video. But her trembling wasn't from fear of harm. It was the fear of losing control. "I didn't do this to you," I said. "You did." Ethan leaned across the table, eyes wild. "You think you can take us down with some blurry video? You're an old man clinging to the last scrap of authority you have left." I slid one last document forward. Bank records they never expected me to uncover. Withdrawals, transfers, payments to accounts with Ethan's initials. His face drained. "This goes to the DA today," I said. "All of it." Olivia covered her mouth again, a soft gasp escaping through her fingers. My attorney gathered the documents. Olivia reached toward me, but her hand stalled halfway. She seemed unsure whether she had the right to touch me anymore. I didn't move, didn't comfort, didn't offer a way back. Her voice cracked. "Dad, please, don't leave us like this." "I'm not leaving you," I said. "I'm leaving what you've become." The attorney rose. I did too. Ethan stared at the papers as though they were written in fire. Olivia quietly fell apart beside him. I walked toward the door without raising my voice, without turning back, without claiming any victory. The law would take over now. The truth was no longer something they could bend, and I no longer belonged in a room where survival depended on silence. I stepped into the hallway with the packet under my arm, ready to finish what I had started. Quiet. The courthouse clerk handed me the last document to sign, a simple sheet, almost unimpressive on its own, yet heavy enough to shift the ground beneath all of us. I read it once, steadying my breath, then placed my signature at the bottom. The ink slid smoothly, no hesitation in my hand. That single stroke removed Olivia from every privilege she once assumed she'd inherit. A new will followed, one written with calm precision, everything placed into a protected trust under my wife's name, guarded by an independent fiduciary. No loopholes, no access for anyone except her. My attorney collected the folder. "It's done," he said, "completely binding." We stepped into the hallway where the administrative panel had posted its rulings for the day. Ola and Ethan stood by the bulletin board, reading the notices with faces stretched thin. The board listed the penalties in plain, clinical language: revocation of property access, termination of guardianship rights, civil liability for coercion, and an order to vacate the Charlotte house immediately. Neither looked at me. They stared at the printed sheets as if waiting for words to rearrange themselves into something less devastating. Ethan swiped at one page, muttering curses. Olivia reached for him, voice cracking, but he pulled away. Their alliance had crumbled the moment the law stopped shielding them. I didn't approach, didn't speak. Silence, at that moment, felt like the only language worth using. My wife waited in the lobby with a small shoulder bag resting at her feet. When she saw me, she stood slowly. I offered my arm. She took it with a softness I hadn't felt in years, a quiet trust returning piece by piece. We walked out together. No audience, no apologies trailing behind us, no promises, no explanations. By the time we reached the parking lot, the afternoon sky had softened to a greyish blue, warm enough for her to lift her face, as if letting it wash something away. I helped her into the car, closed the door gently, and took the driver's seat. We didn't go back to Charlotte. I drove southeast until the air changed, until salt crept into each breath, and the horizon widened into slow, easy water. Savannah greeted us with quiet streets and a breeze that carried nothing sharp in it. We rented a small house near the marsh, just big enough for two people who wanted peace rather than noise. Life settled into a different rhythm there. My wife rested more. She hummed while making tea. She looked less frightened each morning. Sometimes she'd ask if I missed Charlotte. I always shook my head. The world we left behind kept trying to pull at loose threads. Olivia called the first week, 3 times in one afternoon. She didn't yell or demand. She pleaded. "Dad, please, just tell me why. Please, at least talk to me. You can't really mean to cut us out like this. We're family." Her voice carried desperation, maybe remorse, maybe fear of the consequences circling around her. I listened for a moment, long enough to understand she wasn't calling for my wife's sake or mine. She was calling because the walls were closing in, and she wanted the same man who always carried her burdens to carry this one. I pressed the red button. The second call came, then the third. The same cries, the same promises, the same attempt to rewrite the truth now that she faced accountability. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before tapping block. The phone went still. The house stayed quiet except for the soft clatter of my wife stirring a spoon against a mug. She looked over at me. "Who was it?" "No one who needs an answer." She nodded once, accepting the simplicity. The kettle hissed faintly behind her. She poured hot water into 2 cups and carried one toward me. I took it and sat beside her at the small kitchen table, feeling the wooden chair settle under my weight
No speeches lingered on my tongue. No final words needed to be crafted. Some endings don't come with thunder. They arrive like the sound of a door closing gently behind you. My wife placed her hand over mine, warm and steady. The waves outside continued their slow rhythm, brushing against the shore like a breath that finally found its pace again. And I let the quiet do what I never allowed it to do before. Stand in my place and speak for me. I didn't hear from Olivia again for weeks after I blocked her number. The silence didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. The kind of quiet a man reaches when he finally stops trying to hold together something that's already dust. Most mornings in Savannah began the same way. I'd brew coffee in a chipped mug the landlord left behind, and my wife would sit by the window with a blanket around her shoulders. She still tired easily, but she no longer startled at footsteps or rushed to stand the moment a dish clinked. She was slowing into herself again, in a good way, recovering pieces she hadn't been allowed to keep. Sometimes she'd ask, gently, if I thought Olivia would ever visit. I never answered directly, not out of anger, but because the truth was too sharp to place in her hands. One afternoon, while she napped, I drove to the pier. Fishermen talked quietly as they worked. Gulls circled overhead, and the tide slid in and out like it had no stake in any man's life. I stood there a long time, leaning on the railing, letting the wind settle whatever was left inside me. People think breaking from family feels like cutting off a limb. It doesn't. It feels like walking out of a burning house you stayed in far too long. On the drive home, a voicemail appeared from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won by a hair. Olivia's voice played through the speakers, thin, shaking. Dad, Mum's gone. You took her. You ruined everything. People think horrible things about us. Please, please at least tell me what I'm supposed to do now. Her crying filled the car, but it didn't reach me the way it once would have. Pain doesn't disappear. It simply learns to sit quietly in a corner. I deleted the message. When I got back, my wife was awake, folding a dish towel with careful movements. She looked up, smiling the small, honest smile I hadn't seen in years. I made dinner, she said. Not much, but enough. I stepped beside her, took the towel from her hands and finished folding it. No speeches, no grand declarations, just a task shared between two people who had survived the same storm. Later that evening, we sat outside on the small porch, listening to the soft water shift through the reeds. The sky bruised into a gentle purple, and the air cooled just enough for her to lean closer. Are we safe now? She whispered. I didn't answer with words. I just rested my hand over hers, steady and warm. The world behind us could shout, accuse, rewrite, or beg, but none of it had a place here. Some stories deserve to end without a final confrontation, without forgiveness, without a return. Just the door closed, and the life quietly rebuilt on the other side. And for the first time in a long while, the silence felt like home.